Hi everybody and welcome to our webinar. Apologies for starting a few minutes late. We had a couple of technical issues which hopefully are ironed out now. So this webinar today is all about understanding key retail events with modern data analytics and AI. My name is Sue Fabre. I work here at Ancoris. I'm the User Enablement Director, and I've just got one slide to show you, just a little bit of housekeeping before we make a quick start. So we're using a platform called Livestorm at the moment, so just wanted to point out a few areas of the screen which you're welcome to use throughout the session. We've got a chat pane which you can use just to send any messages to us. We've also got a questions pane, so please do use that to ask any questions as we're going along today, and we'll make sure that we answer those at the end of the session, if not during. And we'll also put up a couple of polls while we're running through the session today as well, just really to get feedback from you and to see if we can help you in any other ways. Hopefully you can see my screen. If you do have any issues at all, let me know via the chat. I do have James Green here from Ancoris and Sean Burke from Fivetran. So I'm going to hand over to them now and I will speak to you at the end of the session. Thank you.
Okay, shall I start? Thanks a lot, Sue. So yeah, thanks all for joining this morning. So my name's James Green. I'm the head of data analytics and AI at Ancoris. And just a bit of my background. So I've been working about 20 years in data. I was 12 years with Goldman Sachs, and I've worked for a number of consultancies since then. So yeah, so great to virtually meet you all. Sean, do you want to give a intro?
Sure, yeah. So my name is Sean Burke, and I'm an account executive for Fivetran. I'm based in the London office. So I'm going to give an overview of Fivetran just after James finishes his introduction.
Okay, perfect. So it's all around this white paper that we actually wrote in collaboration with Fivetran. So I think Sue's going to share a link to it in the chat. Essentially, this gives a lot of detail on best practices really for modern data analytics and AI, specifically for retailers, and then more specifically for looking at retail events such as Black Friday. So yeah, we really would recommend you read that. Okay, cool. Next slide, please, Sue. A little bit about Ancoris data and AI. So our values really, we optimize business performance through data analytics and AI. In terms of our people, we're a team of predominantly data scientists, mathematicians, data engineers, and data architects. As a Google Premier Partner, actually, Ancoris were one of the first Google partners in the UK. We work solely with Google, so we're not looking at Azure or Snowflake, or so we're solely looking at Google, and we're very lucky in that we work on some leading edge products within the Google Cloud space, particularly in the ML and AI area, and yeah, so it really helps future-proof our client solutions. Then we've also got a complementary set of other services, including app dev, infrastructure, and geospatial. Next slide, please, Sue. Now, we partner with a number of strategic partners. So Google Cloud, as we mentioned, Fivetran for modern data ingestion, which Sean will be kind of giving you an overview shortly. We also partner with dbt for data transformation and Looker for visualization. And I'll be covering some of these later in the webinar. Next slide, please, Sue.
Great.
Okay, so I'll hand over to Sean.
That's me. Thanks, James. Okay, so I'm just going to give a quick run through of Fivetran and where we fit in this conversation. So in a nutshell, so Fivetran is a fully automated cloud-based integration tool, which is zero code and zero maintenance. We'll replicate all of your data sources that you have into a data warehouse of your choice. We pull from almost all cloud sources and on-prem databases as well. Fivetran reads from your logs and automatically captures schema changes using change data capture, and then will replicate any new or changed data onto pre-built, ready to analyze schemas in the data warehouse for you. So the premise of Fivetran is we're really freeing up all the resources, time that is currently being spent on building and maintaining data pipelines so that they can refocus their time on driving more value with that data in the data warehouse instead, like driving customer insights or reporting, for example. So that's us in a nutshell. If you just go to the next slide, these are just some of our highlights as a company. So you'll see that we're now a unicorn status company. Our last Series C funding has brought us to a 1.2 billion valuation. We've over 2,000 customers, and that's growing rapidly every day. We've won a number of awards over the years, and now we're partnered with a number of tech partners, including Snowflake, Google, AWS, and Databricks as well. We have offices globally. I'm based in the London office. We have an EMEA office in Dublin, a US office, as well as an APAC office in Sydney, and we have an office in India as well, and Munich. So some of our retail customers there include some pretty big names like Sony, Asics, we have Forever 21, Sports Direct here in the UK, and House of Fraser, Jack Wills, for example. So some big names, and yeah, hopefully we'll provide a bit of insight on what we're doing for them. Maybe it might be relevant to yourselves as well. If we just go to the next slide. Yeah, so we've done quite a bit of research with our prospects and customers, and these stats are based on some of the dimensional research data that we've gathered. What we found was that 52% of companies are using 11 or more data sources, all of which require pipelines that need to be built across your organization. 92% of analysts are doing that data integration themselves today. So 90% of analysts are reporting unreliability in those data sources. So ultimately, whether it's due to working on the data integration or valuable time being spent cleaning up this unreliable data, analysts are lacking the time to do their own work, and 68% of them reinforce this in the survey. The next slide shows what your data pipeline requirements should be, and this is what you should be looking at in a data pipeline as part of driving your business further with analytics. So you need to be able to bring all of your data into one place, onto a schema that your current and future analysts know how to navigate for easy querying. You need to make sure that you're not losing data in case of any interruptions. So you need to ensure that you can maintain the trust across your whole organization and avoid data cleanups. And you need to ensure that it's fully managed to account for end-to-end workflows. So that means that every source change, whether it's like database schema structure changes or an API change, is accounted for well in advance. So that minimizes analysis interruptions. Next slide. So Fivetran fits those needs. What we'll do is we'll bring all the data to your destination in standardized schemas as quick as every 5 minutes. And that's for over 200 data sources, with new ones being added every month. Interruptions in the data source aren't anything to worry about because we'll automatically reschedule from our last historical sync, which ensures 100% data integrity. And then, of course, we're cloud native and fully managed. So we scale to meet your needs as the data sources and workloads change as well. So that's what we do. How we do it differently than every other solution is the following. So with automatic data updates, we accurately update relevant rows in your destination automatically each time. Fivetran doesn't use the destination compute as heavily to do this as other competitors do. With our automatic schema migrations, when a new field or table gets added in the source, these automatically get captured and added to the destination. So almost no other tool does this currently, and this saves engineers a huge amount of time. In case of any sync interruption, like an API outage or a database connection issue, Fivetran saves the last historical sync and starts from there again to guarantee data integrity. So there will be no missing data in your destination. Other tools have reported issues with this, and it's notoriously difficult to build this. Fivetran optimizes API calls and queries to extract the data to lower the overall load on your source systems. We will dedupe, clean, and normalize the data for you before loading it onto pre-built, ready-to-query schemas in the data warehouse. And that's exceptionally useful for pulling from applications or sources with a lot of unstructured JSON, like Salesforce or Facebook ads, for example. And finally, we integrate with DBT to account for powerful post-load transformations in the data warehouse. So that we are an ELT model, so we extract, load, and then we'll transform the data in your data warehouse with our DBT integration. So as a result of using Fivetran, some of the positive business outcomes that you will see are the likes of we will deliver insights more reliably across your whole organization using less resources. We'll be able to centralize more data, so we'll bring across everything into your data warehouse for you to perform analysis on. And we're freeing up time that your resources are currently spending in building and maintaining those pipelines so that they can actually focus on driving more value with that data instead. So these are just some of the connectors that we frequently see in the retail space. Obviously, we cover the majority, if not all, of your marketing applications. So the likes of Google Ads, Facebook Ads, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, Marketo, iTunes, for example. Any of the in-house management stuff like Jira, Zendesk Chat, GitHub, your finance type of sources like Stripe and NetSuite, Shopify. Then your CRM, Salesforce is probably our most commonly used connector. I'd say, I think the stat was 70 to 80% of our customers use our Salesforce connector. And then analytics types of connectors like Google Analytics, GA360, and then of course on-prem databases like MySQL, Oracle, SQL Server, for example, as well. And then to finish up my piece, I'm just going to talk very quickly about a case study here that we have called Asics. You know, Asics is the gymwear and footwear brand. Asics needed to essentially centralize all of their siloed data sources that they had into their data warehouse with minimal resources. So they were going to have to hire 30 data engineers to do that work for them. The key takeaways after using Fivetran to automate the pipelines, they've saved the need to hire those 30 engineers, which is about a 1.5 million total cost of ownership savings per year, which Asics are seeing. They can quickly now get a 360-degree view of all of their customer data. You'll notice Salesforce is their main connector that they're bringing into Snowflake, but they also have Salesforce Marketing Cloud and NetSuite as well, and they're using Tableau to report on that. We've completely eliminated all the pipeline maintenance and engineering costs and concurrency issues that they were previously seeing. And on top of that, on top of the engineering savings, they're actually seeing a 2 to 3 week per month saving on report generation for Tableau reports as well. Now we've increased the bandwidth so they can actually focus on driving out those reports instead of building out those pipelines. That's a customer quote we see there by Peter, the Senior Director for Platforms Engineering and Security. He says, with Fivetran, we're able to reliably centralize all of our data with high quality without having to go from a team of 5 to 35. So hopefully that was clear and that resonated with what you're seeing yourselves. If you have any questions, please put it in the chat, and I'll be happy to address it during the call or with a follow-up call as well. I'll pass it back over to James now.
Okay, great. Thanks, Sean. Okay, so I'm going to spend a bit of time exploring retailers and why should you guys invest in data. So if you could go to the next slide. So at a high level, we believe that the thriving retailers of tomorrow will truly be data driven. And so if you just click your thanks. So if we look at what we mean by that, so if you look at the data-driven leaders right now, so clearly Amazon, Ocado, look at someone like Tesco. So Tesco were the first supermarket in the UK to introduce a club card. And the reason they introduced a club card wasn't necessarily to give their customers, reward points, which, although from a customer standpoint, that's great. Tesco Club Card was all around tracking what customers were buying, which supermarkets up until that point had no idea of. And if you look at innovation what Tesco are doing right now, if you shop in Tesco, you'll notice that in order to any reward system is only as good as the number of people that are on it. So in order to make sure that everyone's using their club card, you'll notice now Tesco started introducing Tesco Club Card deals. So something will be 10 quid, but 5 quid if you use your club card. Now, all of these companies, there are many other examples like this, are all continually using innovation, using data. Now, we have this concept in the retail space of thrivers. And in my personal view, I think there's 3 buckets. There's thrivers, there's survivors, and unfortunately, there's casualties. Now, the thrivers will understand the customers better than their competitors. Thrivers will spot trend in customer acquisition, retention, and products before their competitors do. And another key thing about a thriver in the retail space is they're going to be highly optimized across all their business processes. So this includes things like supply chain. So they're going to have fewer stockouts, they're going to be utilizing less warehousing space, and they're going to have better pricing. In terms of fulfillment, they're going to have faster delivery times. I personally, I get same day delivery in Amazon, and I start to expect that from other retailers, and that's only going to continue. Real-time notifications. I want to know where my product is. I can now see, like companies like DPD, I can see, which street they're on. And again, consumers are expecting this more and more. Customer service, which we all know is super important. Again, these data-driven companies are using things like sentiment analysis to improve customer experience. Marketing, again, these companies that have got their data in order, they're reducing their cost of acquisitions, much more targeted marketing spend. They know exactly the channels that work very quickly. They cease spending on anything that doesn't. They're increasing their click-through rates, and they're acquiring new customers in the segments that they want. They're not just acquiring customers at random. They're using ML to predict the lifetime spend of those customers. And critically, they're retaining them. And then the personalization, which is another thing that we've worked with a number of retailers with, is all about things like product recommendations, really giving your customers more of what they love. So there's a stat out there, something like 80% of Amazon's revenue comes from their product recommendations. And it's well known that there's a high chance of most of you listening to this right now, Amazon will be able to predict what you're going to buy next more accurately than you, which is kind of scary, but true. Okay, next slide, please. Thank you. So why would why invest money in these kind of data technologies, data warehouses? Well, one of the reasons is you want to understand your customer behavior. And unfortunately, if you don't do that, you're going to risk losing them to others who do. And I think that's key for retailers to understand. Right now, the likes of Amazon, it's not a great analogy, but it's a bit of an unfortunate analogy, but they're romancing your customers. Okay, so you may have a customer. Amazon are going to be another highly optimized businesses are romancing those, and they're effectively going to be stealing customers. So unfortunately, retailers are really having to to wise up to this. On top of that, there's been obviously a number of significant challenges, and we'll talk about those now. But the key point here is thrivers adapt quickly, and they adapt based on data, based on facts, not off gut feel or previous experience, because that's out of date. We can see that something like COVID. We've never seen a global pandemic before. And if we just touch on some of those, so I think in the retail space, there's clearly changes to customer habits. So COVID's forced the majority of people to buy online. COVID produced a number of shocks in demand. We saw stockpiling at the beginning. later on throughout, we're working with a leading cycling retailer, and they've seen a huge surge in cycling equipment as people, they don't want to commute on trains, etc. Gyms are shut, so they've been wanting to buy bikes to get exercise. If anyone out there's tried to buy a cross trainer, you'll know, forget it. If anyone out there tried to buy a webcam at the in the beginning of lockdown, again, it's very, very difficult to get hold of this. Now, the retailers that did have stock, again, are able to, they're predicting these, they're seeing these surges in demand. They've got a handle on their inventory and supply chain. Related to that, of course, is Brexit, which, again, we're working with a number of retailers, and there's lots of supply issues that we're seeing. There's lots of increase in delivery costs. So there's a lot of, basically, unfortunately, a lot of challenges at the moment. The key point here is, again, thrivers are monitoring data quickly, and they're able to spot which of these habits are permanent and which of these habits are, purely kind of pandemic related. Second point here, as we've touched on, customers are demanding more. So customers are wanting highly personalized shopping experiences, i.e. they want you to tell them what to buy next. They want same-day delivery. They're also, and this has been a trend for a while now, but they're craving much more experience-led versus product. So if you look at someone like IKEA are phenomenal because they realize that actually people go to IKEA for the experience, even if it's buying the hot dog at the end or the meatballs or seeing these layouts of rooms. That's a real differentiator for someone like IKEA. And personally, I think this experience-led idea where we use kind of data and technology and innovation is only going to continue. And I think retailers, unfortunately, are going to have to face up to that. Customer loyalty is really going to be at risk, especially as a lot more people have moved online. And unfortunately, what that means is when people move online. So if we take maybe an elderly couple who used to shop in John Lewis, they've always shopped in John Lewis. During COVID, that John Lewis was closed. They were forced to buy online. There's probably a percentage of that cohort who are now no longer going to shop in John Lewis because they've either realized that they can get stuff straight to their door the same day, or the pricing is a lot cheaper, etc., etc. So when you're shopping online, people are much more price sensitive. They've got all the information there in front of them. They've got all the retailers. A lot of these people are price motivated, and again, lower margins. The companies that can offer those lower margins are going to be the ones that are highly optimized. A bit like the kind of the Ryanair in the kind of airline space. Okay, Sue, next slide, please. So how can data help my organization? This is something that we hear a lot, and it's important for people to take away that it's not always about the bottom line, i.e. your revenue kind of number. And it's important to note that success metrics really depend on the retailer's business objectives and their core values. And I'll just give you a few examples of what I mean by that. So Sue, if you could just, thank you. So, for example, we work with a prominent high street brand who does ethical beauty products, and their key focus was actually on reducing wastage. So they make fresh beauty products in store, and it was all about reducing wastage and also increasing the traceability for ingredients used in their cosmetics. Another retailer which I've touched on was this, which they supply cycling equipment. Their number one need was availability of their product. So they're seeing huge spikes in product demand. They're also seeing constraints on the supplier side. So we're helping them to analyze stock level data to optimize supply chain and reduce these stock outs. And then another kind of priority that we're seeing across many retailers right now is cash flow. And so we've worked with one of the largest online fashion retailers in the UK, again, using technologies like Fivetran, DBT, Looker, BigQuery to help them analyze and forecast their cash flow. So it's not just about, the crass kind of make more money. It's a lot more subjective than that. Okay, next slide, please, Sue. Okay, so now we're going to kind of look at this at the technology. So we're going to kind of put our technology hats on and give you guys a sense of, from our collective opinion, what does a good modern data and AI stack look like? So next slide, please, see. So as we touched on, these are the technologies that I personally feel are the best in class right now. So Google Cloud, Google has a number of different services. AI, ML, it's a world leader. As you'll know, Google is a world leader in AI. In particular, Google has, in my opinion, the best data warehouse, which is BigQuery, and we'll touch on that. Fivetran, I think, is the best ingestion platform, and I'll give you a bit more insight into what that actually means and how we've used it on a client project. dbt is, I think, is a leading product out there for doing transformations. So once you ingest your data into something like BigQuery or Snowflake, you want a product to handle all the transformations to produce your high-value insights that you're then going to display in visualization tools like Looker. And then finally, we favor Looker for displaying these visuals and promoting action. And I'll talk about that. Okay, so next slide, please, Sue. Okay, I'm not going to go over this slide in too much detail, but this gives an overview of our approach. Now, as Sean mentioned earlier, we favor what's called an ELT paradigm, so extract, load, transform. Now, this is different to the now legacy ETL. So some of you who may have kind of on-prem data warehouses like Microsoft SQL Server, Oracle, if we wind the clock back, say 10 years, it was very, very expensive to store large amounts of data because you had to provision servers, etc. So therefore, it wasn't really, you had to be very selective about what data you stored, and you had to transform and aggregate that data, which took time, and then you had to load that in small volumes into things like SQL Server, and then you could do some analytics on it. Now, with the introduction of massive scale cloud warehouses such as Google BigQuery, that's completely obsolete now, that old model. And what you can do now is, and what companies are doing, is they're hosing data in its raw form. You can easily store, we frequently store with, for example, a 50 billion row table. You can easily have in BigQuery, and you can run a full table scan on it, and it'll come back in about 3 seconds. Now, you're never going to do that on SQL Server or Oracle unless you spent, I don't know, millions on some kind of crazy infrastructure. So it completely changes the way you do this. So what we do on the left-hand side, we've got the different types of data, whether it's Google Analytics, YouTube, Google Ads, spreadsheets, SaaS providers, IoT devices, so that's where you're streaming data, and on-premise databases. We have a number of different technologies that we use for the ingestion layer. So this is all about just getting data in its raw form quickly, safely into in our case, BigQuery. And obviously Fivetran is, and we'll touch on that, but Fivetran always is our go-to for whenever we've got one of these SaaS sources such as Magento, Google Analytics, Braze, Salesforce, etc. And I'll also touch on this. There's also these are kind of more difficult. Generally, you're working with third-party APIs, and I'll give you a real-life example of what that looks like. But Fivetran have custom connectors, which we also use, and I'll touch on those. So the idea here is you're extracting and loading data into BigQuery. We then hand over to dbt. dbt manages all the transformations within BigQuery. Really like dbt, mainly because it's SQL based. So most people in data organizations, they know SQL. We see lots of lakes. Lakes were kind of like the fad of 5 years ago, sold with NoSQL, things like Amazon S3, for example. And the trouble with a lake is it's very quick to get the data in, similarly with this model, but you can't get the data out because it doesn't scale properly, and there's no real transformation. So the data's organized really in its raw form, which makes it very, very difficult to analyze on this side, on the right-hand side. So we use a kind of a hybrid. So we're using dbt to transform this data into assets that can then be consumed at scale by products such as Looker. And it also opens it up to machine learning workflows, which we'll touch on. So we do a lot of work with retailers on machine learning use cases, very, very high value for you. And again, I'll touch on some of those. So that's a kind of a high level architecture. And then Sue, if you could just flip to the next slide, please. I appreciate that can look quite abstract. So I wanted to just give you a case study of just to showcase kind of what good can look like. Okay, so next slide, please, Sue. Okay, so we worked with a hyper-growth global cosmetic retailer. Now they're operating in 60 countries. They had 550 physical store locations, a combination of their own boutique stores, and they would also sell in third-party concessions such as Harrods, Selfridges, Nordstrom across the US. Now the client need for this company, they wanted near real time, so within 10 minutes, self-serve analytics on sales, promotions, returns, marketing performance by channel, and customer acquisition and retention. They wanted their key stakeholders, which were commercial, in the first instance, commercial, marketing, and finance, to be able to self-serve. So they wanted to avoid this bottleneck in traditional BI where, I'm a marketing lead and I want to see some insights. I have to work with a technology team. There's a disconnect just in the terminology that the tech team will use. A marketing person doesn't really understand, and it can take months to get what seems like a simple report to these people. So self-serve is key, and really you want that marketing person going into a product like Looker and actually creating their own dashboard, which is what we're seeing now. And they wanted the ability to slice by region. Slice by whether it's physical store or online store, slice by marketing channel, slice by particular retail weeks. And they also wanted a future-proof tech stack, which is really, really important. Again, you don't want to fall in that trap where if you'd have adopted the lake strategy that was all hot about 5 years ago, those lakes are now kind of sadly kind of redundant and being transitioned into this kind of modern way of doing things. So they wanted a future-proof stack. They wanted to be able to scale as they grow. That was really, really key for them. They wanted to better quickly ingest new data, which is where Fivetran is perfect for that. And they wanted to be able to enable high-value ML use cases, such as predicting how much a customer will spend with you. They wanted to make that ML very, very easy for them to do. Okay, so next slide, please. So these are the kind of the data sources that company specifically had. So their e-commerce platform was Magento. ERP system, where they had things like their product catalogs, inventory, FX rates, etc., was Oracle NetSuite. They were using Google Analytics 360 for tracking visits to their sites. In terms of marketing, they were using Braze, Facebook, Instagram. They're also using Google Ads, YouTube. They were doing TV advertising. So a whole raft of different channels. Typical to many companies, they had lots of spreadsheets. And I'm actually not someone who's, there's actually a very high value use case in actually keeping data in spreadsheets where it's relevant. So this company had their forecasts in spreadsheets. They also had things like daily advertising spend, so they could track what they were spending on each channel by region. Again, these were in simple spreadsheets. And their physical store sales, these were, for this particular company, were actually very difficult to get at. So let's say Selfridges, so their products were sold in Selfridges. Every week, Selfridges would email them what sold in Selfridges that week. And the challenge for this retailer was there was probably about 40 or 50 different stores. There was probably within that about 30 different formats that these were being emailed in. So Selfridges, for example, Harrods are a bit old school, and they were sending stuff through in PDFs. So we had to do some clever stuff to scan those PDFs to actually extract that data. This is typically what you find in most data, in most retailers and other organizations. You tend to find some data that's typically hard to get at, And then with modern technologies, this stuff is actually relatively simple. Okay, so hopefully that's making sense. So Sue, if you could just click the button, thank you. The first thing that we introduced here was we need somewhere to consolidate all of this information so that we can basically analyze it. And we chose Google BigQuery for that, which is part of Google Cloud. Next slide, Sue. Just want to touch on Google BigQuery for those of you who've not heard of it. It's Google's data warehouse. So if you're used to on-prem, it's equivalent to something like SQL Server or Oracle. In the cloud, it's synonymous with things like Snowflake, Azure SQL DB, and Amazon Redshift. Now, unlike things like Amazon Redshift, which requires quite a lot of setup and configuration, it's actually quite difficult to use. BigQuery is fantastic because it's truly serverless. So what that means in real world is you literally just turn on BigQuery, you activate it, activates in about 10 seconds, and you've got your instance. Now, if you don't put any data in it, you don't get charged. So you're purely charged on how much data you store in it and how much you scan. But the fantastic thing about it is it requires no setup, no hardware configuration, no management, and no tuning. So if you look on the left-hand side, I have to explain to junior members in my team what a DBA is. So for those of you who don't know, DBA is a database administrator. I used to have a whole team. So at Goldman, we had a global team. It's probably about 100 people, literally just keeping alive these traditional on-prem data warehouses. Yeah, and the new guys in the team just find that a bizarre concept. But some of you on the call may have experience and may have your own DBA teams in place. Nice thing when you go to something like BigQuery is that completely disappears. You just all of this stuff that you used to have to do, performance tuning, monitoring, all this stuff just goes away, and you just spend your time ingesting data and then getting high value insights. If you flick onto the next slide, please. Now, the great thing with BigQuery, and again, you'll hear me throughout this advocate, just the best time to start this is now. You really need to start if you haven't. It's not too late. It's a good time to start because the technology has come on a long way in the last kind of 5 years. So actually, if you haven't started, you actually it's actually good in a way because you can start with the kind of great tech. But I would advocate start, and you can start with BigQuery really easily. So you can actually start for free, and Google offer, and we can help you with this, $300 in free credit. So you can spin up a BigQuery instance. And to give you an idea of how cheap it is, so really, I think Google are using this as a loss leader. If you store a terabyte of data, terabyte is a lot. A lot of traditional data warehouses weren't even a terabyte in size. That's only $20 to store per month. That is insanely cheap. And the amount of compute power you've got really rivals modern research facilities. You've got hundreds of thousands of servers that Google have in their Google data centers that are actually executing your SQL queries. You're also charged by the amount of data you scan. So if I scanned that 1 terabyte in that month, I would be charged an additional $5. So it'd be $25. Now I'd like to, cost up what a traditional data warehouse would cost that would store a terabyte of data. I mean, yeah, it's obviously going to be significantly more than $25. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so once we had BigQuery in place, the next thing was to ingest this information. And for all of the, sorry, just catching up with the slides. We turn to Fivetran for all of these kind of SaaS providers. So the nice thing with Fivetran is once you've spun up your BigQuery instance, let's take Magento, for example. Now this company had, hundreds of thousands of orders in Magento going back, maybe 10 years. So the first thing that we did is we spoke to the administrator of Magento, and they just needed to basically authenticate Fivetran. So it allows Fivetran to have access to that Magento data. That took about 5 minutes. We then pick a target in BigQuery. So we we architect this in what we call a raw layer. We create a data set in BigQuery called Fivetran Magento, and then we point Fivetran, we point that Magento connector at the data set, and then we click a sync button. That probably took maybe 10 minutes, or up to 15 minutes. And then we just need to wait for Fivetran will do a historical sync. Now the amount of time that takes, and it's a one-off sync, will depend on how much data you've got historically. So from memory, this maybe took 2 hours. Now they wanted it near real time, if you remember. So we chose 5 minutes. So that means that every time anything changes in Magento, Fivetran will be monitoring those changes, pushing those changes into BigQuery on a 5-minute basis, and that's it. So 15 minutes of technical time, 2 hours to wait for that initial sync, and we had a data pipeline built ingesting. There was something like 50 tables that lived behind Magento, and that's syncing every 5 minutes into BigQuery. Now I've firsthand seen lots of organizations, they would need an army of data engineers to do that, and it would take them months. And the problem with data engineers, not to sound harsh, but all they're doing is really moving raw data. They're not really adding any value. The value comes when you start integrating this stuff, applying ML to it. So why we're a big advocate of Fivetran is we can get these POCs, we can get these warehouses built really, really quickly. We repeated that process for Oracle NetSuite, Google Analytics, Braze, Facebook, Instagram, again, all being ingested on a 5-minute stream. Now, if you just could go to the next slide, Sue. Thank you. Now, the nice thing specifically with Google BigQuery, it has a lot of its own built-in connectors. So for things like YouTube, actually Google Analytics 360 and some other sources, you can actually ingest for free, which is really nice. Another great facility it has the ability to ingest data from Google spreadsheets live. So where we had these forecasts and advertising spend in spreadsheets that finance teams and marketing teams were inputting, in Google BigQuery, in 5 minutes, I can create a table that's effectively a live link to that spreadsheet. So when I run a select statement over here, it just pulls that data that's in that spreadsheet right now, and then that gets my results. So really, really fast to integrate some of these, like things like forecast, advertising spend. You could be integrating these literally within an hour. You've got those integrated. Now, the physical store sales was a different beast, really. So if you just skip on, Sue, please. I touched on this before. Every data project I've ever worked on, every client, they always have some kind of what we call tricky or difficult data source. And this particular client, that one was these physical store sales. If you remember, emailed in, difficult to get at. In that case, unfortunately, we can't just plug something like Fivetran in. You have to basically write code to parse those. The good news is that Fivetran has this concept of a custom connector. So you basically have to write some Python code to work out what's changed here. And then you get all the benefits of Fivetran. For example, it's monitoring, all the pipelines are living in one place. It's really, really simple to manage. And that's how we stream that data into BigQuery. Okay, so next slide. So very quickly, we got this information ingested, Selfridges, etc. data took a little bit longer because of that custom piece. We then looked at transforming that data. So this is where we're looking at things like integrating sales, returns, facts, forecasts, marketing, calculating things like cost of acquisition, etc. And we did that using dbt. And if you click onto the next slide, so a couple of things I personally really like about dbt. One is it's SQL based, so it's not Python based or Java. There's no more new languages for people to learn. It's really simple, integrates really well with things like GitHub for software engineering best practices. And then probably the best thing I like about it personally is it produces these lineage diagrams for you. So every square on here is either a table or a view that dbt is managing in BigQuery. The pink dot on the right is our asset is our final table in the presentation layers. That might be a sales fact, for example. And you can see here that all of the different tables, exactly how those are interlinked and those dependency tracking. And dbt produces this for you. You just click a button and it presents this. And just note the layers. So we have a very strict architecture that we use at Ancoris to make sure that these data warehouses are easy to consume from. So we have a raw layer, clean layer, presentation staging, and a presentation layer. So yeah, so dbt is a really great product. And as Sean mentioned, Fivetran now partner with dbt, and there's some out-of-the-box dbt packages that you can hook into. So things like Salesforce, if you ingest Salesforce data into BigQuery, that can take you maybe 10 minutes, and then you can actually have an out-of-the-box dbt package that will contain all of that data transformation logic that's just to save you having to do that. So you'll be able to get this PL layer kind of for free and very quickly. Okay, next slide, please, Sue. Okay, the final piece with this particular client is, okay, so we've got all this ingestion, 5 minutes on a 5-minute pipeline. We're doing all of this dbt transformation. The final piece is to allow users access to that. So single version of the truth is very, very important. We want everyone looking at the same numbers, and we want them to be taking action and delivering value. And if you just click on the slide, so what we use for that is Looker. So Looker is Google's visualization platform. It's synonymous to something like Tableau or Power BI. And if you go to the next slide, Sue, please. So some of the reasons that we really like Looker, it works very, very well with Google BigQuery, other platforms like Snowflake. And the main reason for that is it does everything. It uses the power of BigQuery and Snowflake. So it's executing SQL on the platform. If you've used things like Power BI and Tableau, you're probably used to sitting there for 90 seconds or 60 seconds waiting for something to load. That's because those products are doing it in memory. So they're having to extract different data sets and join it in memory, and it's just really inefficient. So Looker's got a very different architecture. It has a really cool semantic layer where you can define things once, which we really like. It also can act as a data dictionary, which clients also like. They can save 100K on buying products like Elation and use Looker instead. And it's really fun to use in terms of both from a consumer and from a builder perspective. It's really intuitive. It's really nice. It's very googly. Personally, I'd much prefer to things like Tableau, which I just find quite cumbersome and difficult to use. But it's my personal opinion on that one. Okay, and then next slide, Sue, please. Just conscious of time. And one thing I'll touch on, this has been out of scope for this, but machine learning is a really high value application for retail. And as I touched on Google Cloud Platform, so Google are the world leaders in AI and ML. And what they're doing is all the ML and AI that they're using, both within things like Google Search, Google Maps, also the companies they own like DeepMind, they make that accessible to you. So they'll train these models and you can actually leverage them. So it's really, really, yeah, in my opinion, it's no doubt the best ML and AI platform. There's a product now called BigQuery ML, and what that allows you to do, a bit like with, this is very similar to the BigQuery graph we looked at earlier, but data science, traditionally with data science, there were all these kind of activities going on, data engineering, sampling data, there would be programming in languages like Python, they'd have to deploy and productionize things, resource provisioning, scale, all these activities. And one of those is extracting value, which is a CTO or other stakeholder. That's really what you're interested in. Nice thing with BigQuery ML is it just gets rid of all this complexity, and you basically can build ML, so machine learning models using SQL. Really, really quick, really easy to use, phenomenal results. And the nice thing with dbt is then you can then productionize that in a dbt pipeline. So you have an ML pipeline sitting alongside your regular pipeline. Yeah, so really good. Then on the next slide, just to help if retailers are watching this and they're thinking, well, because a common question we're asked, right, is with ML is, well, you know, how can it help my company? And is it a lot? I think a lot of people have a preconception, and it's you know, it's a silver bullet. I mean, it's not magic, right? It can't solve every use case. And the key thing with ML is having experience in knowing which use cases are high value. So if we look at retail in particular, these are some examples. So churn analysis. So being able to, if you're a subscription retailer, being able to predict when a customer is likely to churn, so you can take action. You know, maybe you're going to send them some offers or offer to, you know, get in touch with them. Really high value. Customer segmentation, again, very high value. Personalization, we touched on this before, but things like recommending products, services to your customer is very good. Fraud detection, so looking at potential fraud purchases. Demand prediction, so we're working with a retailer at the moment that's all about demand prediction. So they're seeing these spikes and deficits on the supply side. So we're using ML to optimize that. Sentiment analysis is an interesting one for that client. We're also looking at sentiment analysis. So they've got all of the customer interaction. So whether it's customer reviews on their products or it's customer conversations with the retailer, we're using ML to pick out sentiment. And that's really cool because, so for example, they're looking at if maybe there's a product that suddenly consumers aren't really happy with. The sentiment's reducing on that product, and maybe it's because the manufacturer changed supplier, and there's a fault or quality reduction. And the idea is that then now that retailer is able to spot those and take action, you know, before it's too late and they have to, you know, potentially lose a ton of customers. So lots of high value use cases, and if you need some kind of guidance on that, then we'd be more than happy to help. And then I think the final slide really is just about kind of next steps for people that are watching this. Sorry, wasn't quite the last slide. And the question I'm probably asked the most is, where do I start? And my personal answer to that is start now, but start small. And what I mean by that is pick your number one business priority and then focus on delivering value quickly on that priority. And then so if you just show and the great thing is there's some really good free trials. So for example, Fivetran offer a phenomenal free trial for 2 weeks on each connector. So if you've got something like Magento, if you're that example client we used earlier, you could have a 2-week free trial to ingest data out of Magento. You get the full Fivetran product. We can help you set up BigQuery, and you can make use of that $300 free credit. So we could spin up BigQuery, and then you can ingest all your Magento data hourly or down to 5 minutes for free into BigQuery. In addition, we as a team and Chorus Data and AI, we offer 3 hours of free consulting, and what that allows you to do, so we can help you. We could even help you pick your first high value use case. So, for example, you might want to look at customer acquisition. We'll help you set up BigQuery. We'll help you activate the Fivetran trials and set up the connectors. We'll demo DBT. We can help set up the package DBT packages that come with kind of Fivetran. And even Looker has a great 2-week trial. So we're actually working with clients where they get the full stack. They're not slimmed down products, they're the full versions, and they actually get their own data and they can see it, they can touch it, they can, you know, have people consume reports, and we can do that within like a 2-week window. So if anyone is interested in, you know, in speaking more on this, then yeah, I think Sue's going to put a poll on the right hand side, or please get in touch either with myself or Sean, and we can make that happen for you. Okay, apologies for a slight late start, but yeah, I think we're almost at the close of the hour.
Thanks, James. I'm keeping an eye on the questions. We don't have any at the moment, but if anyone does have any questions, do feel free to pop them in the pane on the right-hand side of the screen. I have put some polls there, so do let us know if you want to organise a demo with Fivetran or some consultancy with us here at Ancoris. And I will stay on for a few minutes in case you've got any questions or any follow-up. Thank you.